Hi, my name is Paloma, and this is my Module 8 submission for Sociology. So the first prompt asks, society has changed over the past decade from style to language and even our environmental resources. Give an example of how social change has affected physical environment, population, innovation, diffusion, and mass media. Social change can be referred to as the adjustments and changes in the patterns of structure, social behavior, and culture. Social change has drastically impacted the physical environment, with advancements in our technology and us needing more space for residential buildings. We are having to take over environmental land and affecting the areas in an ecological way. Social change can also impact the population, with resources growing exponentially in third world countries. Their population is likely to increase in the coming decades. Innovations are also largely impacted by social change. As people begin to spend more time shopping online, many business owners began to bring out innovating ways for consumers to buy, receive, and resell merchandise. Diffusion can also be referred to as the steps taken to pass cultural traits from one social unit to another. Social change has affected diffusion because our social behavior in regards to different culture has changed drastically over the years, and this allows people from different backgrounds to mesh together and bring cultures together. The mass media can also be influenced by social change. Changes in behavior and culture can influence the way mass media decides to broadcast their news, shows, and information. The second prompt says, the information revolution was and still is an important perspective in social change. In your opinion, how has it changed society, and how do you feel it will change society in the future? So the information revolution can be compared to the Industrial Revolution because it has largely influenced the way society functions. This revolution refers to the development of technology and computers and the vast expansion of easily attainable information through the internet. Services like news, government data, books, and grocery delivery are all accessible online now. The information revolution has changed society's ways that no one ever thought could. People are now able to order their groceries online and receive them in less than 2 hours. Students can access grades and assignments online, so students that tend to be forgetful and leave things behind at school can now access those online, and they're able to do that without having to miss any points. Over the future, I think a lot of our basic necessities will be accessible online. People will likely be able to attend court hearings online for tickets instead of having to go to the court. I know those can get really overcrowded sometimes. We'll likely be able to take care of any government necessities online too, like obtaining your driver's license, renewing a passport, anything like that. I know right now it's a lot easier to do that online, but in the future it'll probably be a lot easier, and there will be a lot more things that we can do instead of having to go to those overcrowded government offices. There might also be an option for students to virtually tour the universities that they're interested in attending instead of having to fly over. If they are wishing to attend an out-of-state college, they can maybe attend a virtual tour and have those questions answered to them in the comfort of their own home instead of having to fly all the way over to that university. The third prompt asked, how has modernization changed many underdeveloped nations? So modernization, according to Hughes, is the process by which a society moves from traditional or pre-industrial social and economic arrangements to those characteristic of industrial societies. Modernization has changed many ways that underdeveloped countries function on a regular basis. These changes depend on the country's economic involvement in education and literacy and communication, which eliminate any extreme inequalities in the social statuses. These underdeveloped countries will likely move towards the Western liberal democracies and begin to modernize. There is, however, an unequal advancement when we compare the advancements of developing countries to those developments in Western nations that are already developed, more so than developing countries. So the last and final prompt asks, what are the types of social movements that have occurred in history, and when and why do they occur? The first type of social movement is a revolutionary movement. In this type of movement, the followers are seeking to overthrow an existing policy, and they wish to replace it with a vastly different policy. So the An example of this would be the movements that took place in Soviet Russia. These movements occurred because of a cultural drift that occurred within the rulers, with new rulers taking over. The second type of social movement is a reform movement. Unlike revolutionary movements, the followers of these movements just want to make changes to an already existing institutional policy, So the last prompt asks, what are the types of social movements that have occurred in history, and when and why did they occur? So the first type of social movement is a revolutionary movement. In this type of movement, the followers are seeking to overthrow an existing social system and replace it with something completely different. So they wish to completely get rid of the one that's already existing and implement new ideas. An example of a revolutionary movement is the communist movements that occurred and took place in Soviet Russia. These movements occurred because of the cultural drift that occurred when new rulers started taking over. A second type of social movement is the reform movement. Unlike revolutionary movements, the followers of these just want to make changes to an already existing policy instead of completely overthrowing it. So they wish to make changes that are going to benefit the greater amount of population. Civil rights movements led by MLK are considered to be a reform movement. This movement took place in the 1960s in the United States due to a social injustice towards people of color. He started this movement to make changes to the institutional policies that were made by the government that segregated the people of color to whites in the country. The resistant movement is a third type of social movement. This type of movement is used to block change and or get rid of already implemented change towards an institutional policy. In the 1960s, as the civil movement progressed, there was another group that opposed the social movement. Members of this group were also in the Ku Klux Klan. They wished to block the progression towards racial equality. This movement started also because of social injustices. The last type of social movements are expressive movements. These movements are more concerned with renewing and changing of people as opposed to implementing any institutional changes. Most expressive movements are seen among underprivileged individuals. One example is the hippie movement in the United States that occurred in the 1960s and 70s. The movement occurred because of the cultural drifts that occurred during this time due to the war. Thank you so much for watching my Module 8 submission for sociology.